morning, everyone. If you guys are like me, you've been wondering what's going to happen at the end of our read aloud book that we did before break. So, I thought we might as well continue on with this. Words of Fire by Jennifer Nielsen, donated to us by Brighton for our read aloud. So, you may have to fill in your families or anyone else who's listening on what's happened so far. We are on chapter 30. So, I'll probably try to read maybe a chapter or two a day and put it up somewhere for you guys to listen to. Anyway, chapter 30. I didn't understand why Lucas thought it would be easy to sneak out of Lithuania beneath the steady watch of the soldiers. It seemed incredibly difficult to me. Lucas and I crept down the slope toward the river, sneaking past the soldiers on our hands and knees, aware of the crunch of each dry autumn leaf, the crack of every fallen twig, or the scattering of a startled bird or squirrel at our approach. By the time we stopped at the bank of the river, my hands had tiny cuts on them and my knees were raw, and we hadn't yet begun the difficult part of our journey. Difficult, not dangerous. After we passed the approach to the bridge, Lucas led us beneath the planks as they rose overhead. I understood it was our best place to hide, but the soldiers were directly above us. One slip, one roll of a rock beneath our feet, and they would hear us. Once we reached the river's edge, Lucas silently pointed to the undergirdling of the bridge. At first, I thought only wood beams were there, hardly enough to get a solid grip. But when I looked closer, I saw a rope that extended from one side of the bridge to another, directly under the feet of the soldiers. I shook my head, but even as I protested, Lucas took hold of the ropes with his hands and legs and began pulling himself hand over hand above the river. Overhead, one soldier shouted an order to the others to do a sweep of the area, which surely included checking the shores of the river. I had to go. Immediately, I copied what Lucas had done, wrapping my legs around the rope and moving hand over hand across the water. If I looked upward through the slats of the bridge, I saw the boots of the soldiers, heard them discussing their luck at being on duty after the cold wind had died down, and closed my eyes when their weight shifted and grit fell on my face. The rope lowered with our combined weight, but we remained in the shadows of the bridge. When Lucas finished crossing, the rope bounced higher and I was closer to the soldiers than before. If they looked down, they would easily see me. I was terrified. Once on the other side, Lucas grabbed my arms and pulled me low, which was hardly necessary. I had no intention of standing tall and offering the soldiers a target. "We're in Prussia now, so they won't shoot," he said. "They have no way of knowing which side of the border we belong to, so they won't risk a war. But if they suspect that we've crossed, they'll be more watchful for us trying to come back." My ears perked up. "Trying? Why didn't you say we would succeed in coming back?" Lucas only grinned and then tilted his head in the direction he wanted me to follow him. From there we trekked through the night, and the city of Tilsit came into view by early morning. Along the way, Lucas pointed out various places where it was safe to test or to load sacks to smuggle back into Lithuania. "This territory has been claimed by Germany," Lucas explained, "and so it's still not on our own land as it should be. But Germany likes anything that makes life more difficult for Russia. They're usually quite happy to overlook their own smuggling laws on this side of the border." I giggled and let Lucas take me on a tour of the town, though it wasn't much of a tour. Half the time I thought he only decided which road to lead me down when I was already on it ahead of him. Then he'd point to various landmarks and buildings and make up stories about them that couldn't be possibly true, not unless fairies had built the bakeries and trolls had paved the roads. At least the stories kept me awake until the print shop was finally open. Lucas greeted the printer by name. We were told that Ben had paid for the order already, but he was glad that two of us had come, for there were several books to be carried. "Several books?" Lucas glanced sideways at me. "That's too many. Only one of us is carrying the books back." That didn't make sense to me. I wouldn't trudge along beside him while he did all the work, so I shook my head. "If you can carry them, so can I." He nodded to the printer to give us a moment alone, and then pulled me into a corner of the room and frowned. "I'll take half the books," I said. "I'm strong enough." Lucas sighed. "You don't understand, Audra. I'm the only one going back. You're staying here." "What?" Pressure began building inside me. "You tricked me into crossing the border?" "I had to. If I'd told you that I was getting you out of Lithuania for good, what would you have done?" "The same thing I'll do now. Refuse to listen. I'll make my own decisions. I don't need your help or Ben's. Do you know what Ben risked and what Ben paid in bribes to get the shoulder bag to you in the prison? And now you'll thank him by ignoring his orders?" I'll thank him by helping with the cause he still risks his life for. I don't mean to interrupt, the printer said, wheeling one cart piled high with what had to be 30 or 40 books. But Ben actually has more books waiting here than he might have remembered. I can't continue to store them. Our police tend to look the other way when we print illegal books. But if things are getting so dangerous over there that a young girl's life is in danger, then I don't want the trouble following me here. You'll take these books or I'll have to dispose of them. Lucas had been eyeing the books, his jaw falling open as the printer spoke. Finally he mumbled, I can't carry all of these. No, I said, smugger than I ought to have been. You can't, not if you're crossing alone. Luke sighed. Lucas sighed. Just this once, Audra. And when Ben yells at you for returning with me, I'm going to tell him that I tried to stop you. I'm going to tell him a few things as well. We loaded the books into 4 canvas sacks the printer gave to us, carrying one over each shoulder as we left the shop. But we hadn't gone far before I knew I was going to have trouble hauling them all the way back to Lithuania. Testing the weight again, I told Lucas, I'm worried that I'll fall into the river and ruin these books. And drown, Lucas said with a wink. I didn't see why he would wink. I could swim well enough, but not if I had to keep hold of the pile of wet books. We're not going back on the rope, Lucas continued. The books would make our shoulder packs hang too low and we would easily be seen. Then how? My eyes widened. Ben wasn't serious about the barrels. Luke pressed his brow low. Ben is serious about everything, Audra. You know that. By then we had arrived at the barn that Lucas said was owned by an elderly Lithuanian couple. They devoted their lives to helping with book hearing on this side of the border, he explained. Good folks. From inside the empty stall, Lucas rolled out 2 wooden barrels, each the size of a small traveling trunk. Either end had a rope handle attached to it. I shook my head. We'll still drown. Not if you hold on. He opened the lid and began setting the books inside. The lid will keep the water out, and the barrels will float, so don't let go of the handle. We'll enter the river in a quiet place, and you must be sure to exit in a quiet place. The sooner the better, so that we can find each other again. But even if it means that we exit a kilometer or 2 apart, stay in the river tonight until the area feels safe. Tonight, when it's dark? Of course, when it's dark. I arched an eyebrow. What should we do until then? He pointed to the upper loft. We sleep. And if we're lucky, when we wake up, there'll be a raging rainstorm. That'll triple our chances of a safe crossing. And us getting soaked. Lucas chuckled. Trust me, we're going to get soaked tonight. I'd rather be soaked than be seen. With a frown, I asked, tell me the truth. Do we really have any chance of getting back safely? Lucas leaned against the barn wall and considered his answer for a moment, then finally said, in the story of Ray, who is it that is constantly giving her trouble? I'd have preferred that he gave me a direct answer, but since this clearly wasn't going to happen, with a sigh, I said, the snake gives her trouble. Yes, and I'll grant you it's a dangerous thing to have a snake for one's enemy. Snakes are fast and they strike hard, often killing their prey. You may not see or hear the snake coming until it's too late. And if you are not careful when you fight back with a single turn of its body in an instant, you might be its victim. Now my sigh became a groan. Thanks for telling me that, Lucas. But the soldiers ahead of us. No, the story is about Rue and the snake. We're not thinking of the soldiers right now. You see, although Rue understood the danger of fighting against the snake, she also knew that she had all the advantages. The snake is confined to the ground, able to see only the smallest piece of its world. But Rue can stand taller and higher, and she can see more than the snake ever even knows exists. She can see how much better her land might be if she could rid it of the snake. The snake has no hands for working, no feet for walking and running as Rue does. All she needs is a plan. I looked down at my father's satchel, thinking of the recipe I'd found inside the notebook. I needed a plan too. We should get some sleep while we can. Lucas finished sealing the lid of his barrel and reached for my load of books, but I pulled them away. Maybe later, perhaps while I'm waiting to sleep, I can read just a little. It wasn't just a little. I chose a book of fairy tales, stories not so different from those of Rue and the Snakes, with words I wouldn't have been able to read at all a few months ago. Now I flew through them. That night I devoured one story after another, of heroism, bravery, and nobility, often finding myself looking through the eyes of the characters as if I were the warrior or the princess or the trickster. I read until I couldn't force my eyes to stay open any longer, until they ached from all they were absorbing. Even then I shook my head, hoping for one more line, one more page. I loved the feel of the paper between my fingers, the smell of the ink. every word was a symphony singing to me of other lands, of other people, of places where new ideas were encouraged, not made illegal. Not here. I shook my head again and forced myself to continue reading. Hopefully, something in one of these books would tell me what to do when I was about to cross a border so dangerous that it very well might cost me my life. That's the end of chapter 30. I'll be back to you shortly with 31.